All right. So this is Algebra 1, Distance Learning, Lesson 6. Today we're doing more with section 9.4. It's week 2 for 9.4. Our main learning targets today, this week, are using the method of completing the square to rewrite a quadratic that's in standard form in vertex form and identify the vertex, and basically put it in an easier to graph form. Solve an equation using the method of completing the square like you did last week. And then the additional learning target is using that method of completing the square when the number in front of the x squared, the a value, is not just 1. So if we had like 2x squared or 3x squared or something like that. So before we jump into the problems, for this assignment you're going to have 12 problems total. I expect you to do all of them, but 5 of the problems I'm going to do in the video. So you can just take notes on those, but make sure you include those notes when you turn in your assignment, please. That way you get full points for it. So with those notes you use for each of the 5 problems I do up here, use those for the other problems, and I'll continue to instruct you on like, hey, this problem's like these ones. Now make sure when you're doing a problem you read the instructions for it. That's been one of the things that's cost some people some points. If you're not sure what the instructions are saying, you can come back and like rewatch what I did for that similar problem, and I'm following the instructions, so I'm kind of modeling what you're supposed to do for those. All right, so make sure if it's saying like solve by completing the square and working backwards, that's the way that you're doing it. Some of you, looks like maybe you went on the internet and kind of found a different way to do these things, like you multiplied it out and then used quadratic formula, or multiplied it out and did some fancy factoring. That's great, but the learning target here is solving by completing the square and then working backwards. So that's the method I'm assessing you on. If you do it a different way for this, you don't get the points for that learning target. Also, a couple other things. If you get something like this, let's say you have x plus 3 squared equals 16. Most of you are getting the idea to go plus or minus square root. So you have this plus or minus square root of 16. Some of you have been doing this though. So you're going from the square root of 16 and then you're just writing down to 16. Don't do that. Make sure when you're doing a square root that you're actually writing down what that square root is. Like square root of 16 is just 4, so it'd be a plus or minus 4. Now lastly, a lot of you get to a spot like this. We got like some x plus or minus something equals plus or minus number. And you just jump to x equals x equals. And about a quarter of a third or a third of you are goofing this last step up. Make sure that you actually go like minus 3 minus 3. X equals negative 3 plus 4. X equals negative 3 minus 4. Some of you are going like 4 plus or minus 3 instead of negative 3 plus or minus 4. So you're switching up the order. So make sure you write everything out and you're keeping that positive negative on whatever that is, that square root. Okay, so let's jump into the actual learning here. That was just a little review, little reminders. Let's get going. So we're going to start with rewriting a quadratic in vertex form using the method of completing the square. So this is an example of when we'd use the complete the square method, and we're not actually solving anything. We're just putting it in a different way, or making it look a different way so that it's easy to graph. So let's look at the first example. So example 1, we have y equals x squared plus 18x plus 90. We want to rewrite it in vertex form. And then we're going to say what the vertex is, because it's really easy to find it when it's in vertex form. So what we're going to do here is like, hey, there's nothing to solve because it's y and x. What we're going to do though is we're still going to use the method of completing the square. We're going to say y equals, we're going to go parenthesis, x squared plus 18x plus blank, parenthesis, minus blank, plus 90, just like we did last week. We remember what goes in those blanks, like, okay, I need this to be a perfect square. Y equals x plus something squared, right? So I need a number here that's going to, well, make that work. And remember, the trick was to find that magic number was to take this 18, divide it by 2, That gives us 9, and then we square the 9, and that squared number is what goes in here. So here, 9 squared is 81. So we have a plus 81 inside the parentheses and a minus 81 outside the parentheses. And then when I'm taking this x squared plus 18x plus 81, we're going to factor that. And because it's a perfect square, we use that 81 specifically to make it a perfect square. It's going to be x plus whatever half of this 18 is, or that 9. So x plus 9 squared here. And then I'm going to add negative 81 and 90. So basically 90 minus 81. Oh, look, it gives me 9. So I have x plus 9 squared plus 9. And then that's my vertex form equation. And the vertex, remember, is going to be opposite of this number for the x. So negative 9, comma, that number for the y. Right? Because it's x minus h. A times x minus h squared plus k. Right? H comma k, opposite of this, that number. Okay, that's it. That's all you gotta do for problem 1. I'm gonna do problem 2, then you're gonna do problems 3 and 4 using these 2 examples. All right, let's look at problem 2. Same exact instructions, except we have x squared minus 12x minus 9 equals y. Or y equals, it doesn't matter the order, which were y's on this side or y's on that side, so it's on the other side of the equals. Okay, so same thing. We're going to go, and let's move this y over. Y equals parenthesis x squared minus 12x plus blank minus 9. It's always the x squared part, the regular x, and then plus blank, parenthesis, minus blank, and then whatever this is on the outside. Okay? So from here, I go, all right, well, got to find that magic number to turn this into y equals x something squared, and then something. So to make this a perfect square, I got to take half of this number, that negative 12, divided by 2. That's going to give me a negative 6. And then I square that negative 6. Squaring that's going to give me a 36. So here I get x squared minus 12x plus 36. But then I need to subtract that same number, so I'm not actually making it any bigger or smaller. So here, I need to take this, which is a perfect square, factor it. Remember, it's going to always factor down to x minus this case, because it's a minus 12. This was a plus because it was plus 18. Here it's going to be minus. And then it's half of this number, which was that, so minus 6. So x minus 6 squared. And I'm going to combine those two. And we're going to get minus 45. It's a negative 36 and a negative 9, so together they're going to get more negative. So that's the vertex form equation. Now we're going to see what the vertex is. The vertex is going to be opposite of this number for the x, that number for the y. So positive 6, negative 45 for the vertex. And that's all you got to do. That's what I'm looking for here. What I'm looking for is you're being able to take a standard form equation like these, use the method of completing the square to put it in vertex form, so your answer is just another equation, and then identify where the vertex is, right? And then we could graph it fairly easily, like here the a value is 1, so just over 1, up 1, over 2, up 4, over 3, up 9, from there, so on, like we did in chapter 8. But you already did that, we don't need to review it. All right, so right now do problems 3 and 4. Pause the video, come back, like write down what time you're at on the video, come back to it for problem 5, because I'm going to do problem 5 on the video. So, you should, pause it, work. You should have done problems 3 and 4 now. So now, problem 5. Problem 5 is just like the last 4 problems on last week's assignment. I just want you to review this and get good at it. Some of you struggled with it. We're just getting some more practice with it. It's a 2-week lesson. You get more practice with it. So we're just going to solve by the method of completing the square here. So it's x squared plus 20x plus 65 equals 1. Okay. So I'm going to do this one example, then you're going to do problem 6, 7, and 8 just like this, using this method. So what we do is we take the x squared and the 20x, and we're going to say, I want to make that a perfect square. So I go parenthesis, x squared plus 20x plus blank parenthesis, just like we did in the previous problems, minus blank, where this is going to be the same number, and then I'm going to bring this plus 65 equals 1 into it. All right, so now I need to find what goes in those blanks. Same as before, we're going to take this 20, divide it by 2, that gives me 10, square it, that gives me 100. 10 times 10 is 100. So x squared plus 20x plus 100 minus 100 plus 65 equals 1. Cool. So this, remember we can factor to x plus, I want you to say in your head, what's going to go there, x plus squared. It's going to be this number, right? That 10, half of that. So x plus 10 squared, and then negative 100 plus 65 is going to be minus 35 equals 1. So here, because the instructions are to solve instead of just rewrite in vertex form, we need to continue working because it's equal to 1, not equal to y. So we want to get x all by itself. Now is the solve by working backwards. We don't want to square this out. We don't want to multiply it out. We're just going to undo. Hey, look at that. It's a minus 35. What's the opposite? Plus 35. Plus 35. So we add that to both sides. Here we have x plus 10 squared equals 36 now. We got to get rid of the squared because that's the furthest thing from the x. So we undo that with a square root, right? Opposite of the squaring is the square root. And we have to remember anytime we're using a square root while we're solving, we go plus or minus. So plus or minus square root of 36. So here, that undoes this. So we just have x plus 10 equals plus or minus, and we need to remember we're square rooting the 36. So we're saying what number times itself is 36? And that's 6. So we're going to write plus or minus 6. We're going to take that square root. That's what we're doing from this step to that step. So now we have x plus 10 equals plus or minus 6. And we're going to actually show the work all the way through. No skipping steps because that's how we make mistakes. So we're going to go minus 10, minus 10. We're going to write it out. X equals negative 10 plus or minus 6. Negative 10 plus 6 is going to be a negative 4. Or x equals negative 10 minus 6 is negative 16. More negative. And that's it. Those are our two answers. We got it. Cool. Okay. That's that. So go ahead and do problems 6, 7, and 8. And pause the video, do those problems. You can come back and look at this example if you need to. I'm going to do problems 9 and 10, and then you'll do problems 11 and 12. So if you haven't done so yet, do problems 6, 7, 8, and come back. Okay. Okay, hopefully you did problem 6, 7, and 8. Now, I'm going to show you how to do problem 9 and then problem 10. So problem 9, we have 3x squared plus 24x plus 49 equals 13. Like, it's a 3x squared, not just an x squared. It's got a 3 in the front. So what do we do? Well, we're just going to look at this part right here. Just that part, because that's the part we care about for making this perfect square, is the x squared and the x part. And honestly, it's easier to work with just a regular x squared, not a 3x squared. So what we're going to do is we're going to divide each of these by 3, and we're going to write it as 3 times whatever. So in other words, we're factoring out a 3 from the x squared and the x to write it as 3 times x squared plus 8x. And then I'm going to say plus blank. The reason I got 8 is 24 divided by 3 is 8, right? And then I'll say plus blank minus blank plus 49 equals 13. So this is the step that's different. We have the number in front of the x squared. We have to factor it out of the x squared and the x, or in other words, divide it out to write it as that number times this divided by 3 and that divided by 3. And then we've got the plus blank minus blank. Cool, so that's the first step that's different. So now we're gonna do the same thing. Like, well, I need this to be a perfect square. So I'm gonna take this number, this 8, I'm gonna divide it by 2, I'm gonna get 4, I'm gonna square it, and I'm gonna get 16. Okay, but what I'm doing here is I'm adding 16 3 times. So what I need to do, well, 3 times 16 is 48. Really, I'm adding 48. So in order to keep it even, to keep it the same, I need to subtract 48. So I'm going to go minus 48, or minus 3 times 16. That's what we're doing. We're adding 3 16s, so we need to subtract 3 16s. Basically to add 0, because 48 minus 48 is 0. Okay, so that's the tricky part here, right? We divided the 3 out of these to write it as 3 times what? We did the complete the square part here, found that magic number, which was 16, which we added, but we had to subtract 3 of those because we have 3 of them here. Okay, so now we have 3 times, we can write this as a perfect square, x plus 4 squared. Negative 48 and 49 give us plus 1 equals 13. Wonderful. Now we got vertex form equals number. We can solve this by working backwards, right? Remember, it's solved by completing the square and then working backwards. So here I'm going to go minus 1, minus 1. That gives me 3 times x plus 4 squared equals 12. Divide by 3. Right? I said multiply by 3, divide by 3. That gives me x plus 4 squared equals 4. We got to get rid of that square, so we are going to square root it. And we need that plus or minus square root. So that gives me x plus 4 equals plus or minus 2, because the square root of 4 is 2. We got to remember that we're taking that square root, right? And then do this step of subtracting 4 on each side. Minus 4, write it out. X equals negative 4 plus or minus 2 to get our 2 answers. X equals negative 4 plus 2, that's negative 2. Or x equals negative 4 minus 2, that's negative 6. And there we go. Those are our 2 answers. Cool. All right, I'm going to do one more. I'm going to do problem 10. And then your job is problem 11 and 12. Okay, so let's look at problem 10. Here we have 4x squared minus 48x, 4x squared minus 48x. And then plus 153 equals 25. Okay, so we're going to do the exact same ideas as with this problem, but obviously we have different numbers in problem 10. So we're going to look at it and say, okay, just look at the x parts. Right here, the x squared and the x. We've got a 4x squared, so what we're going to do is we're going to divide out that 4, and we're going to write it as 4 times whatever we get when we divide that out. It's always going to be just a regular x squared, because that's the number we're dividing out, is the 4. So 4 divided by 4 is 1. Negative 48 over 4 is going to give me a minus 12x. And then I'm going to go plus blank, parenthesis, minus blank, plus 153 equals 25. So, just like we had here, we divided out of 4 this time. So now I need to find what goes in this blank here. So I say, all right, well, it's a negative 12, right? Divide that by 2 and then square it. So I divide the negative 12 by 2, and I get a negative 6, and I square it, and I get a 36. So here I have added 36 inside the parentheses, which means this side of the equation is getting 36 bigger 4 times. So here, really what I'm adding is 4 times 36. 4 times 36 is 144. So I need to subtract 144, which is 4 times 36. That's where that 144 comes from. Multiplying that, because really I'm adding 36 4 times. So I need to subtract 36 4 times, or subtract 144. All right, so now I'm going to go about finishing my complete the square steps. So here I have 4 parentheses x minus 6 squared, minus 6 because it's half of that number, minus because it's a minus there. If that was a plus, that would be a plus. It's a minus, so it's a minus. Negative 144 and 153 are going to give me plus 9 equals 25. All right, because I go 153 minus 144 is a positive 9. So now I can just solve by working backwards. Right, so I've got this completed square, vertex form equals number. So now just minus 9, here, 4 times x minus 6 squared equals 16. We're going to divide by 4 on each side. Right, so we're just working backwards, we're just undoing stuff just like we did in section 9.3. Here, this is x minus 6 squared equals 4 again. Square root both sides, plus or minus. That gives me x minus 6 equals plus or minus 2. And then we're going to add 6 to each side. Plus 6 plus 6. So x equals 6 plus or minus 2, or the plus or minus, the positive negative is still on the 2. So here x equals 6 plus 2 is 8, or x equals 6 minus 2, which is 4. And that's that. Those are 2 answers. Cool. So that's problems 9 and 10. Problems 11 and 12 are just like this. Just remember that the new tricks here, kind of the new things versus what we did before and what you did on 6, 7, and 8, are you need to take this number in front of the x squared and divide it out of the x squared and the x. And write it on the outside, so 3 times or 4 times. And then whatever you find in this blank inside the parentheses, with the minus part, you got to multiply this number and that number to get that one. So 3 times 16 gives us minus 48. 4 times 36 gave us minus 144, right? And then when you're working your solve by working backwards, you just got this extra step of dividing out that a value. Okay, so that's it. Really, it's just 7 problems for you to do on your own. I've still got my office hours going. Email me questions, that sort of thing. And hope you have a wonderful week. Thanks for watching.